besties, welcome back to the channel, or welcome if you're new. My name is Cayenne and this is Cayenne is Booked. Welcome to episode number 2 of my favorites by year of the In Death series. If this is your first episode and you're like, girl, I got no clue what you're talking about, I will link the first episode down below, which goes into what the story is about, how many books are in the series, the background of everything, how to understand like the futuristic world, like what certain things mean, all the characters that we're going to meet, etc. I did like a whole whiteboard moment in the first episode, so that's probably where you need to start, as this is going to be a continuation of it. Now, just for like, you know, funsies, there are 60 books currently released in the series at the time of this filming. 2 more have been announced, so we're going to be up to 62 by February of 2026. And for this episode, we're going to be going through 2005 to 2014. And I'm going to be talking about the favorite book from that year, because as I said in the first episode, Robb, aka Nora Roberts, releases 2 books in the In Death series every single year, and sometimes a novella, but there's always guaranteed 2 publications or 2 full novels of the series every single year. So we have 2 books to choose from, and I'm going to tell you my favorite from 2005 all the way to 2014. So I am very excited because the book we're starting off this episode with is such a banger. So grab yourself a drink, be sure to like this video if you like this video, and subscribe to my channel. And without further ado, we're gonna go all the way back to 2005 with me to talk about our favorite book in that year. So in 2025, she only released 2 books in the series, and that is Survivor in Death and Origin in Death. And of these 2 books, Origin in Death has to be the favorite. So Origin in Death follows the ICOV agenda, which is the first time in the entire series that we're kind of introduced to the idea of cloning, right? So Eve is trying to solve a murder that has to do with this family of very prominent doctors, and you know, they're very well liked within the community, but then some things aren't adding up, and I'm trying to make sure that I don't like messes up for you. So this is set in 2059 in New York City, and this is where scientists begin to work and they kind of expand the idea of technology. And she finds Dr. Wilfred B. Icove dead in his office. It's a very chilling but efficient crime scene, but also it's too immaculate to kind of be a crime scene. He's known as Dr. Perfect. And then everything's too clean, but then there's the mystery woman, and then there's doctors, and then there's the idea of playing with like the different laws of nature. So this is, and I'll go ahead and talk about it now, because even in I just read book 60. Even in book 60, we still refer back to Origin in Death, which is why Origin in Death will always be that girl in this series. Like, it doesn't matter, because this is when like Robb really went, you know what, like we're going full sci-fi, because this has been like, we've been dabbling in the sci-fi, but this is the full on, can we clone people, can we not clone people? So Nadine First, who's our resident crime reporter, writes a book about this, like this case, featuring obviously Dallas and Peabody and Rourke and like the whole gang. And this is something that will follow this crew all the way through the rest of their careers, because it ends up being picked up, it ends up being made into a movie, and it's a case that is so studied and so closely looked at, and people still talk about because of the origins of it, because it does have to do with the idea of cloning and the idea of being able to bring people back almost, or like use their DNA to create like another version of them. So that's Origin in Death, and that is Origin in Death is the In Death book. Like, if you were to ask me to like rank my top 5, like Origin has to be in the top 5, because this is really what took it from, yes, it's romantic suspense, and yes, it's crime, but like now we're catapulting it into like definitely from the sci-fi perspective. So Origin in Death is my favorite from 2005. In 2006, she released 2 novels and then 1 novella. And you have Memory in Death and you have Born in Death. And Born in Death is my favorite book of 2006. This is so weird to like say. Okay. Oh, yeah. Okay. So there's these like two young lovers in this like firm, this lawyer firm, and they're both murdered. And so Eve is obviously like on top of their murder, but then her best friend Mavis calls, and Mavis is like, hey, like I'm really worried. Like my friend who I go to this birthing class with, she has gone missing, and there was a lot of drama with like the father of her kid and blah, blah, blah. Like I'm really worried about her. And so on top of working this case of like the double homicide, Eve in turn also looks for, I believe her name's Tandy. Is her name Tandy? Doesn't say her name. Well, that's annoying. Anyways, so the reason why Born in Death is definitely my favorite is because it really just once again shows, because like a lot of people think of Eve as like a very cold, calculating character, when in a sense like she has like a sense, like she has a moral compass and a sense of loyalty to the people that matter to her in her life. And Mavis was one of the very first people that like she truly came to care about, and they really are like best friends and like sisters of the heart. So I just absolutely adored the fact that, you know, Mavis is like, hey, like I really need your help. And Eve's like, oh my God, I have so much going on. Okay, girl, what do you need? And she goes to the mat to make sure that her, that Mavis's friend is found and is taken care of. And there's just a really cute scene at the end when like they both have their babies, and I won't spoil it, but it's definitely a moment where I was just like, that's my girl. But yeah, Born in Death is that girl of 2006. I keep trying to say 2026, but okay, so in 2007, she released 2 novels, and then, of course, a novella. And you have Innocent in Death, and you have Creation in Death. And Creation in Death is my favorite from 2007. And this is... Okay, so this has to do with a serial killer. And it was a case from, like, 9 years previously. And basically what happens is this guy unalives brunette women and then poses them artfully and very specifically in a very specific manner in very public parks so that people find the bodies. But they've taken it and they've leveled it up in the sense that like now they're coming straight for Eve, because the people that they are targeting work for Rorik, who is Eve's husband. Now we all know Rorik is a billionaire and owns like so many different subsidiaries and places, but it is very obviously a targeted attack on Eve, because I believe, if I remember this book correctly, she was one of the ones on like the very early, like the first case the first time around, and was very close to like catching this individual. And then it comes back around, obviously. And here they are again, but this time like it's a very targeted attack against Eve, and then obviously against Rorik. And he is not thrilled. He is, I am canceling everything and I'm in this with you until the very end, because the last thing he's going to do is, number 1, come after my wife, and then number 2, come after my people. Because you know what, Rorik, he stands on business, and what you're not going to do is come after his cop. It's just not going to happen. And it was just like a really like wholesome, like the whole group comes together and they're all there for a specific reason, and her whole group like Baxter and like everybody is behind her on this one. And it's just like, once again, like the ensemble cast, like ensembles in this one, and it's just chef's kiss. And plus I always really like it when like Rorik is trying to do like the my wife, but also still be very respectful of the fact that like she's the lieutenant and she's in charge. All right, so we're moving on to, hang on, let me move my sticky notes. I have so many sticky notes for this video. Moving on to 2008. And in 2008, she released 2 books and a novella. So it was Strangers in Death and In Salvation in Death. And I will say I went back and forth kind of on which one to pick, but ultimately I went with Salvation in Death. And this one is about Father Miguel Flores, and somebody murders him during a Catholic funeral, and it's potassium cyanide, which is not something that's obviously used in like 2057, I want to say is when this book is set, 2058, somewhere around there. And then it was who would want to murder a Catholic priest, right? And it's assumed identity, like it's don't let me like, hang on a second. So there's a knife wound, removed tattoo, plastic surgery, and then Father Flores may not be the man that everybody expects him to be. So it's very interesting how like the whole thing kind of comes together, and like Eve unravels this like basically like this plot over, I don't know how many years it was it like 20 years, this like 20-year plot to kind of like set himself up a specific way, and he uses the Catholic Church to like give himself a leg up. And I just found it like very fascinating how the crime was like managed, and I always find it very interesting like the intricacies that go into like such a long con, because 20 years is a really long time to like con people and like have people believe you are who you are. So like I found that aspect of it very interesting. All right, 2009, we had 3 books, so 2 novels and 1 novella released in 2009, and we had Promises in Death and Kindred in Death, and Promises in Death wins the 2009 vote. This one's such a difficult one. So this is about Amaryllis Coltrane, and she is dating Chief Medical Examiner Morris. And she used to be a police officer over in Atlanta, and then she transferred up to New York, and she had been on the squad for a while, and everybody really liked her. And she gets a phone call one night, and she goes out, and she's murdered with her own weapon. And this is arguably one of like the hardest notifications that Eve has ever had to do, because Morris is a really good friend of hers, and she knows that it's absolutely devastating to him, because like him and Amaryllis were like getting really close and like really cared for each other, and it was so hard for her to like tell him about it. And then it really just becomes about making sure that like there's vengeance. No, there's not vengeance, but there's justice for, number 1, Amaryllis, but also 2, for Morris, because like that was Morris's lady, and for her to have been murdered like that is absolutely devastating for him, obviously, and to come at a police officer was even like more egregious as well. So it was like multiple layers to why this was like so egregious. And Eve works like day and night to make sure that she's going to be able to get answers for him, as she would do for anybody, but like especially for Morris, because like there's that connection, and she knew how much like he cared for her, and to know that like they're never gonna see each other again, and like that entire like everything's all over at this point. Oh my god, it's so sad, and it is absolutely like devastating, especially when it like ties back to some, and it's not ridiculous, but it definitely digs back to like her life in Atlanta and like why she left, and it feels like such a waste when you finally find out what happens. But it's once again like even the squad like coming together for like one of their own, but also to like standing up for somebody who did the right thing and was a right cop and was this person who was like important to her squad but also important to Morris. Like this one like really tugs at the heartstrings, and like when I got to this one, like I was almost just like, oh, do I really want to re-listen to it, because it is definitely one where you're just like, oh, like it hurts your heart, but it is also so good, so well written. And once again, like Rorik's there because he knows that like this is really difficult for Eve, and like he's so incredibly supportive, but then also too like when Morris starts to flag or like struggle, like Rorik's there to help pick him up, because he'll never want to understand how Morris feels, because that means he's going to be without Eve, but he understands like that fear that you carry as somebody who's married to somebody in law enforcement. So this book kills me every time, but like it's also arguably so good. Okay, so 2010 she released 2 novels and a novella. Wow, she's really on a roll. And you have Fantasy in Death and then Indulgence in Death, and I chose Fantasy in Death as my favorite. And this is so this is about Bart Minnock, and he is the owner and shares the CEO with 3 other people that he went to school with, and it's a video game company, and he has this like really like bomb game coming out soon, and he's at home and he's like working through the levels, like kind of working the kinks out, wanting to double check a couple of things, and then ends up being murdered by the 3D game that he was playing, which shouldn't have been possible. And obviously this is Eve kind of digging down to the nitty gritty of like realizing that it has to be one of the 3 people who were closest to him, because they would be the only ones able to program something that would allow for something to actually happen in real life. And it's like kind of just this like devastating picture of why people make just like absolutely ridiculous ridiculous like decisions based off of like, I don't know, money and fame and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, like I think it was very aptly named too, At Fantasy in Death, because you know, like he lives in a fanciful world and he's a video game creator, and like he died in a fantasy world because of like everything that happened. So I really enjoyed this one, and like I really kind of liked the idea of like that backstabbing that comes from like people that you should have been able to trust. Like I really liked like her exploration of that, and I found it to be really interesting. All right, so in 2011 she once again released 2 books and a novella. I will tell you guys right now that 2011 was a very hard year for me to choose, because Origin and Death was like an easy one to pick, and so is Promises. Like there are a few in the series that like are really easy to like pick out because like they're that book. But Treachery and Death and New York to Dallas were both published in the year of 2011, and this one follows Peabody finding what do you call it? Peabody is, what do you call it? In the shower in the old gym that they have at headquarters, and she overhears like these corrupt cops essentially talking about this like department essentially, and like how they have been what do you call it? They're bad cops essentially. Like internal affairs should investigate them because they're like they're stealing money, they're stealing drugs, they're like holding people up for like rent and things like that. Basically like they're an organized crime unit within a police unit. And then you have New York to Dallas, where Dallas finally is able to confront a parent figure in her life, and is also confronting a man that she had already put in prison but like somehow escaped, but he's tied to the parent figure in her life. So these were really, really hard for me to kind of choose between, but I went with Treachery and Death because I think this is a really great representation of like who Eve is as a police officer, and the fact that she stands for right versus wrong. And it also is kind of like the first time, like, so Peabody does the right thing, immediately calls Eve, immediately is like, hey, like, there's an issue, I need to talk to you about it. Eve is like, okay, like, we have to go about this a very specific way because she is, her dad's a commander, so she's following in her dad's footsteps. She is lieutenant or captain of her own department. And so basically, like, if you're going to accuse somebody who is at her standing within the department, like, you really have to be right. But also too, they've been running this ring or whatever out of their unit for years now, so like they have done a really good job of covering like their footprints and things like that. So I just, the way they all kind of came together and the way that they made Eve's house like their headquarters, and then essentially like broke apart this unit and were so strategic about it. Like, it was so incredibly interesting. And, you know, there are a lot of negative things to be said about police officers, but I think this is just another, like, a book where you once again see like that moral compass that Eve has of like right and wrong. And she goes, no, like, we took an oath and we said we were going to protect and serve, and we said we were going to do X, Y, and Z, and like, you've broken that oath and you mean nothing to me. Like, it is, it's so good. Like, this is such a good one, and like, as I'm talking about it again, like, I want to go back and re-listen to it simply for that moment when Eve like finally boxes this bee in and she's like, gotcha. It's so good. But yeah, like, of that year, like, like I said, 2011 was a really difficult one for me to try and decide between, because like arguably either one could have been that girl. So I highly recommend this one, obviously. Then you have 2012. She released 2 novels in 2012. And this one, once again, kind of a difficult one And you're probably like, why, girl? So you have celebrity and death and you have delusion and death. So celebrity and death is the Icove agenda has been, the Icove case from Origin and Death has been made into a movie, and Eve and Dallas are the same person. Eve and Peabody are meeting the cast of characters and the people who are like playing everybody, and they're kind of like gonna go to like the first showing of it and all of that. But then the woman who plays Peabody is found dead in a pool at the party. And so then they have to investigate the death of the celebrity playing Peabody. And then this one is, what do you call it? Oh yeah, so this is the one where a chemical is released inside a bar, and then for like the next couple of minutes, people like essentially turn on each other, and they end up with like 80 bodies at this bar because the way that the chemical reacts is that it, it causes you to hallucinate almost and like assume that like everybody's after you, and hallucination and paranoia essentially is what happens. So this is a wild one because, and this one is my favorite. This is the one I chose, Delusion and Death, because this it ties back to a cult from like the early 2000s. And Eve, they find out the end, and like once again Nadine's like, oh, I'm gonna write a book about this, and Eve is like, leave me alone, like I'm never gonna get away from the Icove agenda, and now you're gonna write another one. But this is like the takedown of a cult that they thought was out of commission from like early 2000s, but has apparently come back, and I couldn't resist choosing this one as my favorite from that year because cult, hello. But yeah, no, really good. Like either one could have been the choice, but I really felt like, once again, like Nadine's writing a book, it's probably going to be a movie, but also too, like the crime itself was just so interesting. Yeah, so in 2013 she's back to writing a novella, and so she has a novella and then 2 books. So you have, which one was first, Calculated in Death and Thankless in Death. I chose Calculated as my favorite. What's really funny is I went back just to double check all of this and then like completely forgot what each book was about. Oh yeah, so this is a like one where they realize an innocent woman has a hit on her, and it's a violent streak that the killer is about to escalate. The body's found like at the end of a stairwell, and people just assume like, oh, she's a sex worker, it's not a big deal, but really she's like this high-powered attorney, and it turns out to be like a much deeper case than like anybody was expecting. But obviously Eve and Rorik are willing to go dig deep and like dig into whatever they need to like find what happens. And obviously it ties back to like a very specific and calculated reason as to why she died and like why other people are dying as well. So I really enjoyed it. Like I said, the crime was incredibly interesting in this one, and like I really like how it all, I don't want to say fell apart, but like fell together. There we go, how it all fell together. All right, and then we have our last year for this favorites video, and this is 2014. And you had 2 books. Oh my God, so sorry, I thought I saw a bug. You had 2 books released, which is Concealed in Death and Festive in Death. And once again, a hard decision, but I went Concealed in Death. And this is the beginning of On to Dawn, which we'll talk about like in the next video, because this is kind of where it starts off. But they find 2 bodies wrapped up, so like they start demolition on this building. And I'm pretty sure it's Rorik who finds them. Yeah, so he goes to demolish this building that he just bought and has this like really perfect vision for it. And then when he gets into the wall, they find 2 bodies wrapped up in clear plastic wrapping, and he immediately calls Eve, and by the time they finish excavating everything, they've got 12 or 13 bodies of like young girls, and it looks like they're ranging from like 11 to like 17, 18. And this is when Dr. DeWinter joins us, and she is a forensic anthropologist, so she goes like and is able to date, and like one of the people on her team is able to create faces for these young girls who runaways, foster care runaways, got mad, ran away from home. They always thought she was going to come back, then could never find her. So like there's a bunch of different stories that kind of like go into this. But this place was originally a sanctuary, And then that sanctuary like went under because they weren't able to like pay for it. And then they opened up like a different place, different name, better funding, etc. And it ties back to, and I don't want to give it away, but like it ties back to the sanctuary and the people who used to work in the sanctuary, and someone who, I don't want to say like took advantage of the girls, but like definitely inserted himself in a place like he shouldn't have. But then this is kind of like what spurs Warwick into creating like On to Dawn, which is like his version of the sanctuary, and like kind of like leads them towards their path of like creating that safe space for women and children. And then obviously because they have a shelter for women and children, and then they have a place for young girls. And this is kind of also to a start to like a different type of arc that we see later in the series. So I think that's also a reason why I chose this one, because like this is a place where like we find the love of someone's life starts to work here, and like that's how they meet. And then we meet one of the characters that we see now. And so it's like we kind of like have all these different avenues and all these different places that these like these characters kind of join our crew. And that's another reason why like I really found this one to be really beautiful, but also to like just how hard Eve works to try and stand for these girls who like nobody really understood the links to like them missing. And it was so sad, but like I loved this book. It was so good. So yeah, definitely Concealed in Death would be my favorite from 2014. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is episode number 2 of my favorite in death book by year. 2025 to 2014 edition. And then I will have the next one coming out because spoiler if you've made it this late, I'm actually all caught up on the series. So I've read all 60 books in this series. So let me know in the comment section down below if you have one that you're really interested in reading, or if you're thinking about picking up the series. I love the series so much, and I want everybody to love it as much as I do. And be on the lookout for the next episode because it'll be coming to your YouTube subscription very soon. Thank you so much for watching, and as always, besties, I'll catch you in the next video. Bye.